Hey, you guys, this is Death College, and you are listening to the Academia Gothica official podcast. Thanks for tuning in. So, today's show is actually going to be based on some interesting tech stuff that I've noticed. So, as you guys who have been following along and paying attention to the content, you're probably aware that I am a fan of actually decentralized wares, and I'm working on redoing my entire FTP host server. It's technically supposed to be SFTP, but I'm in the process of configuring it. I'm a fan of P2P. When projects like Beaker Browser came out, I was promoting them because everyone was so used to centralized browsing, even via Tor, which definitely had its ties to not only ClearNet but also when it did have its own exits hosted on semi-anonymous networks, they were still forwarded as addresses to be located. And since the network couldn't be made dark, it didn't actually serve the purpose that it intended to or advertised. And to everyone else's knowledge, I mean, it was certainly serving the purpose for them. So it didn't really change the way that people saw how things could have been hosted, and there were alternative options like, decentralized hosting where they host all of their own stuff themselves on their own VPSs and their own hosted networks that they run themselves, which obviously is more work, especially if you're talking about, basic fundamental needs for everyday life like email exchange and stuff like that. I mean, hosting these things yourself can actually be really difficult for your average person, especially if they aren't familiar with what goes into it and what is required of them in the way of time management, etc. There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into it. But it is an option that is not only viable, but could serve as crucial in the coming days. And, I've always been a fan of things like this. So my intention here is to sort of talk about how preemptively people would benefit from paying attention to the types of cyber attacks that could essentially be zeroing in or honing in on products and services that are already P2P or decentralized, or already place the personal power that a person has when they do this type of stuff on a network for themselves into their hands. So we're talking about stuff like toxic messenger, LokiNet, VPN. We're talking about any kind of UDP, P2P exchange services or hosting, anything like this. And the reason why this is because since everything right now can basically be chalked up to being on a transport control protocol like TCP or SMTP for secure mail transport protocol, or any of these things that would essentially be carrying one's data, wherever they put it, over to a pretty popular network to be using it on, to a pretty popular port, through to another sort of popular port if it's encrypted, because even the encrypted ports are largely popularized and used often, especially for phone services recently, with people not giving out their real phone numbers anymore as a popular thing for their own safety and protection. So they have a general and decent protective mask over their location, so they aren't followed anywhere, or it's a thing now where people like to protect themselves because of a number of reasons, but mostly it's because their phone number is tied to so much of their financial information. So handing that out is kind of just like, if you're not doing it a certain way, it can actually leave you open to a lot of unnecessary attacks, DNS probes, and stuff like that. And all of this actually ties in with the protocols that are used. These are all going through ClearNet on the applications at some point to touch down with a hosted server that is centralized. So, when you access your Chase Bank apps or your, no offense, Chase, but any bank that has a website pretty much has this sort of touchdown to a ClearNet server where information that shouldn't be accessed could theoretically lend way to access it. So that sort of leeway there is sort of dangerous because, if these protocols are then offered to be replaced by things like the CDBC, where it claims to be offline and it's a direct bank transfer and it doesn't have a middleman or what have you, what you're doing is you're essentially having the exact same kind of interaction, but with a centralized bank with its own centralized app, where your information is re-centralized even further into a database of billions of people, where you essentially have no privacy. You would actually have less of a buffer that way, just so you know. So, with all this other stuff that I'm talking about, UDP and P2P, which is peer-to-peer, which is exactly how less cooperative and actually really rude bloatware apps and spyware like Kaza and LimeWire actually operated. It was a good transport method. It was just that the vector using it was a little less than helpful to the rest of the machine that was using it. So, but the concept remains the same, though, despite the tinge of the fact that, whatever was being sent could have a virus on it or whatever, be it in the form of an MP3, a movie, whatever it was, whatever the case was. It's the transport method that actually, when applied, can prove to be more stabilized with some of the security in the form of privacy VPNs or privacy-based VPNs that are around now. And the use of onion leaves specifically has actually branched further away from just Tor being the original provision of this, which, while we're grateful to Tor for being the originator of this popularized service, it is not actually the only option that is allowed or available. And this is a good thing because people are realizing now that they can actually host their own exits. They can host their own exits by themselves with property that they have rented online on their own, and it is no threat to anyone. And in fact, what it does is it stabilizes its own network because it is on a need-to-know basis, and this network can actually go dark if they wanted to. Meaning that if you have enough people with good sense and good intentions hosting this network, there would be literally no problems with it. And the likelihood of criminals attempting to use this information for themselves would probably be filtered out and pushed out by the people running the network in the first place. Because what could then be happening as a result of people who don't have good intentions trying to use a network that is run by people with good intentions is people will find out eventually who this person is, person or people, and they will find a way to out the information of their exit. Because even though it is self-hosted and it can be privatized, you still have to talk to the people running the network to find out how to run it. And this remains this way as a protective measure to self-govern its network and to continue to self-govern it, meaning that any kind of implication to the network that would allude to, negative behavior or behavior that is frowned upon, and beyond frowned upon, I mean, behavior that is outright punished under civil liberties and civil rights, right? This is the kind of stuff where the network itself becomes its own buffer for safety when it comes to who is allowed on the network. So this is really important. And it's important to realize that people really do want to lend a hand in the societies that they build. And sometimes they just need a place to feel like they don't have to be jaded by their own experiences, and there's something to the illusion that the power can be taken back into the people's hands, because it's not as if they're stealing anything. They're just exercising what's already theirs, and quite well, might I add, with some experience and some practice. But with respect to how some of the apps that have been built recently have been running, and I say recently as in like within the last decade or so, a lot of it has been focused mostly on what people believe security is, as opposed to what security really appears to look like in an app until it breaks, until it gets breached, until people's sensitive data gets leaked, and then no one knows where to turn or what their other options were, because they were practicing options that were tried and showed some result, but perhaps were not the true effective measure. Now, when it comes to peer-to-peer, peer-to-peer is only as active as you are, meaning that if you are on a network that is peer-to-peer, you going online shows one little blip on that network, and whoever you talk to and connect to shows a second and literally like an enumerated blip for each person who remains present on the network. So you can have a multitude of identities, but it could still be you, and you're just stabilizing the network with what is considered to be like a stake in your data being there. Now, some people will hear stake and say, oh, you get paid for it, it's like a crypto thing. No, it is not. But what it is a placeholder. So it's sort of like a flag, if anything, or a space holder for what it is that you intend to do with your online presence, whatever it is. Doesn't really matter what it is. So the P2P network stabilizes with the more people that connect to it, and that in and of itself becomes its own security and privacy. It leans more on the side immediately of privacy, because security of the P2P network then gets further locked down with the protocols used by this network and how they are layered in DNS masking to protect it. So there is a combination of DNS masking, onion leaf utilization. There are node bouncing protocols that will filter DHT services from one place to another. There's a number of ways that this is actually put into effect, and quite well, to the benefit of whoever uses it. But it's important to realize as well that P2P and UDP services are so very different from what is already considered to be used as a secure method, or HTTPS, for example, hypertext transport protocol. The secure layer is how that literally translates, but it's secure hypertext transport protocol. These things are, as much as Chrome or Brave or some other really reputable browsers could offer these things, the security is actually within the transport layers being used, and the protocols that are used, the doorways, the ports that are being utilized to bring the data back and forth. Because even though the most used ports are helpful in some ways, they are the proverbial barrel that all of the fish are in. So effectively, it's not really doing what it's supposed to be doing. And, a lot of the DNS information hosting services that are used are proprietary. They are private businesses. They are privately hosted. They are multi-billion-dollar corporations that can afford to play fish in a barrel and, shoot down identities and sell them and not have any repercussions placed on them, because they're controlling the internet. There are entire government-hosted protocols that are used every day by Google. VeriSign is one of them. VeriSign has direct links, allegedly, to the Clinton administration's use of data filtering and, data research, I guess you could say. And these projects have been in the works since the 90s. So if we're just finding out about them now, they could have actually been responsible 30 years prior for the development of an internet that could be monitored the way that it is today. And there's so much that could have been going on that hasn't been surfaced yet, that could explain how other things are happening now. And if we use, or at least make an attempt to use, services that are more UDP or P2P based, if they can be built to not be hosted by anyone but the person using them, that these traits and these exercises can actually be normalized by people, and not have to force a person to rely on one group or another for the right information, because there's a chance that this information was stolen as well from people who actually had this incentive. And it's almost like an ongoing joke at this point, people gathering in twos and threes in rooms talking about how they're going to rebuild the internet. You have no idea how long those conversations have been going on. Me, myself, I can count at least since 2001, myself being privy to a lot of them. So, it's like, this is just, it's just how it is. People get fed up with how things are being done. And, they want to change it for the better, but not to make money, but to fix things, And I don't know. It's just my 2 cents, but I feel like the more people catch the word and hear the word about what is actually out there for them, that's going to help them, that's going to actually help them do what they want to do, then that's all the better, and that's all that really matters, So look up P2P, P as in like, pequeño, for people who are speaking Spanish. I'm trying to practice speaking a little bit of Spanish, but yeah, pimento, whatever you want to call it, P2, like the number 2, P. And if you're looking into stuff like I2P browser or I2P VPN, WireGuard, Tor, I mean, the one reason that I would kind of look against that and just look into writing your own onion and not even relying on what's out there anyway, writing your own onion is basically like taking what is configured to work with ClearNet and writing it so that it can be hosted on your own provided servers that you run yourself with a VPS. And it sounds complicated, but really it's just plugging pieces into place and making them run online. So the benefits of running an onion router are as follows. If you run your own onion router or your own onion leaf, then not only do you get to cooperate with the internet services, but you also get to decide who knows about your online presence and invite your friends and create like a safe place for you guys, sort of like a bungalow or, you know, just some place to chill online, you know, and you get to decide who's there, and you don't have any creeps, you know, stalking you and ruining your network. You don't have any people interfering and, you know, loading stuff on your devices or boxes, trying to frame you for stuff. Like, there are a lot of protective measures that actually put real unadulterated power back into the civilians' hands for it to be used properly and not forced into a place where they feel like they have to abuse it to get their power back, which is what I feel like a lot of people have gone through recently. So I just want to say thank you for tuning in, for all of you who tune in and pay attention. If this has inspired you to do anything, I mean, I'm an open book. I'd rather talk to you about it. And like, instead of just being like, yeah, no, I know the answers. I'm just, you know, I don't know if I'm going to be able to tell you. Like, anything that I know that I would be able to help you with, if you just talked to me about it, I'd probably be able to like do the most to help you, because it's what people need right now. It's what people need. But then again, trust but verify, or in my case, don't trust anything until you can verify yourself that it's true with your own honesty filtration methods. I did write a book on negative trust, so, you know, I err on the side of everything being a lie until it's proven, you know, true. But you know, I'm sure there are ways that people would try to make that uncomfortable for the people doing it too. People are going crazy enough trying to figure out propaganda from truth, man. Give it a break. Anyway, this has been Death College. Thanks again for tuning into my show. Stay tuned for more. Sorry about not posting yesterday. It wasn't the thing to do last night. But it's here and ready today, and I'm glad you're all here. Okay. Take care, guys. More content this week, sometime midweek in the weekend. You know the drill. Catch you later. Bye.